Okay, welcome to this lesson on crawling. So now we'll begin to move around a bit more on the ground. Everything we did in the first two lessons should serve as a kind of warm-up for this. So don't lose track of maintaining maximum level of relaxation and not allowing tension to build up within or between movements. So, to begin to develop a vocabulary or repertoire of movement on the ground, you have to be willing to do some experimentation. But I want to give you a few ideas to get you started just moving around. So, one idea is you can start by just picking up a part of the body, moving it somewhere else, and when you place it somewhere else, it starts to feel like, okay, now if you extend it out, the rest of the body starts to follow that limb or body part. So if I pick up a leg and I move it over here, see, now the rest of the body wants to start to move in this direction. I pick up an arm and move it over here. Now I want to go this direction. This leg goes over here. Now I want to go this direction. So by just thinking about picking up a part of the body, here I lift up the hips and move them over, and the body starts to move this direction. I can lift up the hips and move them this way, and the body starts to move this way. I can lift up the shoulders and move them, and the body wants to go this way. So it just starts to, without giving you a specific movement, it starts to suggest a whole variety of movements in different directions. So with that in mind, I also want you to think about varying your movement with regards to orientation on the ground, direction, and amplitude. So I'll explain each one of those. So when we're crawling around on the ground, by orientation I mean how your body is oriented on the ground. So this type of movement, I'm crawling on my back, this is one orientation, right? I can also start to think about how can I crawl on my side. This is another orientation, right? This is another on the stomach. Other side. Right? So that's what I mean by orientation, just your orientation of the body to the ground. By direction, I mean that you're crawling, you can think about it in terms of just different directions in the room, or you can also think about it as from any orientation. I can crawl in the direction of my feet, I can crawl in the direction of my head, I can crawl to the side, I can crawl to the other side. So and of course, full directions. Those are just kind of the four primary ones. But I can crawl in the direction of my shoulders, so these diagonals, right? You can go 8 directions, right, to start to get an idea of more variation. So that's what I mean by direction. The other type of direction is rotational. So I can go that way, that way, that way, that way, and so on. I can also rotate myself in space, right? So there's this type of direction too, which is rotational. The third variation that you can work on is amplitude. So again, at the beginning, a lot of times it makes sense for us to use large amplitude because we get a sense of movement and we're used to larger movements. But you should be able to crawl with smaller and smaller amplitudes so that sometimes forgetting even about the arms and legs, maybe you can crawl just with the spine. This is really wonderful kind of foundational work for the torso. And again, any position. Imagine if you were crawling through a cave, right? Sometimes the spaces are so tight, all you can do is just move a little bit here and there, and you need to be able to crawl like that. Okay, so those should give you, gosh, that should take you so many places if you just work on it consistently in terms of variety with your crawling and developing broader and broader ranges of movement. So within the context of this crawling practice, don't lose track of your breathing. Just as in the exercises before, part of our practice is to understand and coordinate breath and movement. So when you're working on your crawling practice, make sure at the beginning, as you're just experimenting, you can just make sure, okay, am I breathing all the time? Inhale through the nose, exhale through the nose, or inhale through the nose, exhale out the mouth. Just make sure that you're breathing all the time. But if you want to start to work a little bit more on coordinating the breath and movement, you can start by, for example, as you initiate a movement, right? You can start with inhale, and then as the movement is kind of primed, then you can exhale. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. So on the inhale, we initiate the movement, and on the exhale, we continue or extend the movement, and so on. And that will start to give you a feel for how the movement and the breath go together, are part of the same movement, really. Okay, and the last drill that I'd like you to work on with crawling is the idea of maintaining continuous movement in crawling. So at the beginning, we just think about, well, okay, what can I do? How can I move? And so on. And so we tend to think in terms of like, okay, I'm going to do this movement. And then we'll think, all right, now I'm going to do this movement. Now I'm going to do this movement. Now I'm going to do this. So we kind of go one by one with sort of ideas of what we want to do. But once we start to understand, or I should say, once the body starts to understand how it can move on the ground comfortably, we want to start to move towards an idea of, instead of one movement, the second movement, the third movement, the fourth movement, instead of that, we're just so there's no real separation between those movements. In fact, there's no way really to say where one movement begins and where another movement ends. It's all one movement. Likewise, as I'm doing this practice, I have no ideas about what I'm doing. I'm not planning or thinking ahead about where the movement's going. I'm just allowing the body to find its own internal compass as far as how and where it's going to move and where it feels like it wants to go. So I'm really trying to take myself more and more out of the equation and just let the movement take shape and form by itself. Good luck with this practice, and we'll see you in the next lesson.